Hi, I'm Murray Feldman, and welcome to Easy Money, an extension of the public television documentary When I'm 65. Today's program focuses on the ever-controversial topic of millennials and the way they think about money. You know, millennials can get a bad rap from time to time. They often are labeled as entitled or lazy, but the fact of the matter is they face the same financial struggles that every other generation has faced. But they're also a generation of revolutionaries and entrepreneurs, making changes in the workforce and in the world. Millennials face unique challenges, though, when it comes to money, but it doesn't have to be complicated. It just takes the right advice. Join me and our expert guests as we show you just how easy it can be to take control of your finances and empower yourself. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, student debt. It's the major problem millions of young Americans are facing, racking up tens of thousands of dollars in student loans in exchange for a college degree that, quite frankly, probably won't get them a high-paying job. Americans owe more than $1.5 trillion in student loans. That's a lot of money. It's an average of $34,000 a person. But student loans can be manageable if you get the right advice. And that's why we bring in Deonte Tompkins, a financial advisor and college unit director at Northwestern Mutual. Deonte, thank you for joining us today and being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Good advice you got. I want to share some of it with everybody. I'm hoping you can help clarify some misconceptions that are going on about opinions on how to pay off student loans. Do you pay off your student loans first, or do you pay off some of your other debts first? How does it work?
You know, that's a great question. It's a popular one among millennials as well as working young professionals. And here's the way I see it. Whether it's student loan debt or credit card debt, we're a firm believer that you need a plan for it. So one of the first things we like to educate around is how do we view credit card debt versus student loan debt? Credit card debt is viewed as revolving debt, so not as favorable as something like a student loan debt that is more like a means to an end. So when it comes down to strategy, we always advise sitting down with a financial professional to really go through your goals and figure out what's the best way to pay those things off.
And of course, you have to look at everything, the big pie, all of your other obligations financially.
Absolutely.
All right, so what about paying off student loans before you start to save for retirement? Retirement is a hard thing for somebody who's 22, 23, 30 years old, maybe sometimes even 40 to think about.
Absolutely, especially since the workforce is changing, right? So one thing that I like to educate around is this, you know, in life there are a few things that you can't borrow for. Retirement is one of those. So whether you think about purchasing a car, purchasing a home, or doing some other things, you can't borrow for that. So I do think we need a strategy to pay down debt as well as save for things like retirement and put first things first. So although a unique conversation to have with working professionals, we got to establish a target of when we want to walk away so we know how to save for that.
All right, and there are a lot of ways to simplify student loan payments. Tell me about some of the things that we should be thinking about.
Absolutely. So many Americans and millennials have a ton of student loan debt out there and don't really understand how they function. So we like to take a look at those statements. Do you have subsidized, unsubsidized loans, understanding how that interest works, and then have a solid plan to pay that stuff off. In some situations, it makes sense to consolidate so you have one solid payment, but it all kind of depends on the kind of loans the individual has.
And don't necessarily, if you're a millennial, do what your parents have done, because a lot of them have just ignored the student loans totally.
Correct.
And what we have today is nearly 3 million people who are 60 years old and up are still paying on their student loans. And a lot of them have not been able to qualify for housing in their 60s because they have outstanding student loans from decades ago.
Absolutely. We see people defer, and hope that they go away. And the reality is that they don't. So it does affect you financially in the long term. So we got to deal with that stuff.
All right. And speaking of dealing with that stuff, what can millennials do to prepare their future children for the cost of college education?
Absolutely. One of the first things I educate around is find the money, find the free money, whether those are grants, whether those are scholarships. It's never too early to start. And then one thing they need to think about is my student going to be an out-of-state student? Or are they going to stay in-state? So knowing what the value and the options are around, do I need a Michigan-based plan? Do I need something a little bit more flexible to save for college? But it's never too early to start.
And you just mentioned something that's very important to people of all ages, and that's check grants and check loans that are out there. I mean, we see surveys all the time, and I know you have too, Deonte, that show many people don't even try to get a grant or a loan or some kind of assistance because they don't think they would qualify for it. In reality, there's a lot of money that is on the table every single year, untapped, and people could have gotten it.
Absolutely. So we always say, listen, it doesn't matter if you're going for a particular corporation that has a scholarship out there, whether you're interested in a unique skill set like a skilled trades that could provide some opportunity and relief for education in that realm too. Go find the free money, start early, let it accumulate, and it's going to help everybody out at the end of the day.
And I like what you just said about your company, because some people don't realize that companies do have certain advantages. Some are loans, some are grants, some are scholarships for children, grandchildren of workers, aunts and uncles who work there might be able to get some money for the nieces and nephews as well.
Absolutely. You know, one thing that we know is education costs continue to rise, so why not start early and help offset that over time?
Well, a lot of great things to think about there. Deonte, thank you so much for joining us today, for your advice. It's invaluable, and it's sure to help millennials manage their often intimidating student loans.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Technology, everybody uses it. Millennials use it probably more than anybody else. They use it to advance every single day. But can it also bring them down? The answer is yes. We're talking cybersecurity. News you need to know next. Here's an easy money tip. Buying a house. It may seem like an impossible feat for millennials, but with the right advice, that new home can be within your reach in no time at all. Millennials buying their first homes today are likely to pay over 39% more than baby boomers who bought their first home in the 1980s, according to researchers at Student Loan Hero. Home values have increased by 73% since the 1960s when adjusted for inflation. Millennials are spending more on rent and student loan debt, so it takes a much longer time for them to save for a down payment. And to top it all off, housing is less affordable for millennials compared to the rest of the population because their incomes just don't match up with those who have more work experience. Here are a few tips that can help you save efficiently. Make sure you're setting a budget. When you figure out how much you're going to spend on a house, you can calculate your down payment, which is usually 20% of the home's cost. Don't forget to include closing costs, moving costs, and maintenance costs. Next, get with a mortgage lender and make sure you're getting the best loan possible. Down payment assistance programs are usually an option to help you reach your goal of buying a home, and they could mean that you'll put down less than 20% to buy that dream home. Be sure to compare rates and fees between a few different lenders to make sure you're getting the best deal. The most important thing is set savings goals for yourself. Make it a priority to set a certain amount aside every month in a separate savings account. That way, when the time comes, you'll know you'll have enough money for your down payment. If there's one thing millennials are great at, it's technology. Advancements in technology have really changed the way millennials look at finances, from things like apps that actually take your change and invest it for you, to websites where you can find freelance jobs. But with an increase in technology comes an increase in cybersecurity risks. According to the FBI, millennials accounted for nearly 34% of all cybercrime complaints reported in 2018. And that amounted to a lot of money, more than $440 million in losses. David Darajotis is with me right now. He is Vice President of Burns & Wilcox and a National Professional Liability Practice Leader. David, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Murray.
All right, first things first, what are the most common scams that millennials are falling victim to, and how can they prevent that?
Sure. Well, it's no coincidence that millennials are targeted because they typically tend to be very savvy social media users and technology users. But with how we're using that technology, we have to watch out for one thing. That's social engineering. A lot of the crime that we see, especially according to the FBI's crime report from last year, it ties back to social engineering. We've already been involved in so many different data breaches. We have to do our part to make sure that we're securing and protecting the information that we can control. So with social engineering, you'll typically see it's a form of deception. An attacker will get you to try to do two things, one of two things. They want you to either take action, so it's going to be click on a link, open an attachment, or give up information. Maybe it's a social security number, password, a username, something that they can do with to take over your account. So we have to be very careful about how we're using technology, protecting our information.
All right, so we're talking about emails that come in that you may click, phishing,
Yep.
P-H-I-S-H. And then we're talking about the social media too.
Yeah.
That really plays a big role in cybercrime, almost hard to keep track of.
It does, and it's interesting because with social media, platforms were used as the medium to take over $100 million last year
Wow.
from people. So people are going to go to where there's activity, and if you have active use on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever it may be, that's where the criminals are going. And with social media, one thing you want to do, especially as it relates to social engineering, you want to build trust. You want to build trust. That's so important. So if I know the type of groups that you're a part of, if I know the interests, the likes, maybe where you've checked in, I can use that information against you to hit you with some type of phishing email or to try to pull information out of you. If I can establish that trust, that's why social media platforms are so important.
All right, what about millennial parents? Now we're getting to the age where they're starting to have children of their own. Their children can also start to fall victim to scam, almost from the moment they're born.
Yeah, if you look at the number of identity theft victims for minors last year, we're talking about over 1 million children. So they make great targets because typically they're not going to be checking their credit or taking out a loan until they're of age to go to college or they need to have some sort of credit. So there's a long tail. That crime can go unnoticed for a long time. And if you look at video games, when you have children that it's geared towards, 12 and older, with adults that are interacting with them, that makes for a bad recipe. So it's very important if you're going to allow your children to participate in online gaming, which is a good experience, you want to make sure that they're doing it in a private setting. Don't share a username that's going to identify them as an individual. Don't have an email address that will identify them as an individual. Make sure all that information is masked and don't have them interacting with people they don't know. You want to be able to go through and check the security settings and the user settings because you can allow cross-platform, people that have mobile phones, laptops, Xbox, PlayStation, they can all join in and play together. And especially with the phones, you can allow for in-app purchases. So you want to restrict that and don't allow them the ability, especially if they're younger, to make those purchases on their own.
And if a credit card or magazine subscription comes to your kid, perhaps there has been a breach someplace and somebody's using that child's identity. And the child, as you had said earlier, may not know until it's time to buy a house someday and they come back with a bad credit report. So there's an increase in cybercrime. It's also affecting workplaces. It goes from the home to the workplace, and that's a growing concern.
It's a huge concern. If you look at the way we transact with one another, I don't care what department you're in, whether you're in finance, accounting, marketing, email is the primary way that most people communicate. So email is where the attackers go. Last year, according to the FBI, $1.3 billion were taken from organizations because of what's called business email compromise or account takeover. Think of all the different places that you might use your email address that's non-work related. When they get compromised in those third-party sites, a lot of people are reusing the same passwords. They're using it in places that they shouldn't be that are completely unrelated to the office. That compromised credential, username, password can be tied right back to the company, especially if it's matching, and allows them to get right into the system, and then you have an unauthorized access.
Speaking of passwords, 1 out of 4 Americans has never changed a password, and 8 out of 10 people use that same password on multiple accounts.
Yeah, I wish that were not an accurate stat, but it is, and that's what leads to so many people having their social media accounts taken over or unauthorized access in the workplace because they are reusing the same exact passwords all over, tied back to the same exact email address. So what you want to do is make sure it's extremely long, at least 12 characters or greater, and then I recommend using a password manager. You want it to be something that you can't even remember, and the password manager will do that for you.
Password manager, key word. Key phrase to remember.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much for your expert insight into cybersecurity and privacy, David. It's essential knowledge that everybody needs to know, especially millennials, in order to protect themselves and their finances as well.
Thank you,
David
Murray.
showed us. All right, we'll be back in just a moment. Here's an easy money tip. While technology can present some dangers, it can also help you get your finances organized. There are several apps and websites that can get your finances in order and help you get educated. Some apps can help you set a budget and stay on track. Mint is an intuitive financial tracking app that can help you take control of your financial life. It puts all of your funds, transactions, and accounts on one interface, and it uses information to calculate your net worth and to give you tips on how you can improve your credit score and reduce banking fees and even save more, all for free. The Prism app helps you pay bills by sending you alerts about upcoming due dates. All of your account balances and expenses for the month are organized into a calendar or a list and paid using your method of choice so that you never miss a payment. Acorns is an app that proves a little really does go a long way. It sets aside your spare change or rounds up purchases using a linked credit or debit card. It then takes that spare change and invests it for you. These are just a few of the ways that you can make saving an easy and convenient part of your daily routine. Millennials are defined as people born between 1981 and 1996. So that means the youngest millennials are now just 22 years old. At that age, it can be very hard to make saving for retirement a priority. It's out there years and years from now. But it's never too early to start saving for your future. Millennials, though, face a unique challenge that previous generations haven't had to face. Let's hear more now from economic journalist Knight Kiplinger on the role social media plays in millennial finances.
You might look at social media and say, oh, look at that fabulous trip they took the kids on. Look at this new home they moved into, that new car. You don't know how they're paying for that. Odds might be very good that they are paying for that with debt. You, with less conspicuous consumption, fewer trips, not as fancy a car, might be wealthier than the Joneses.
It's an epidemic. The compulsive need to check every different social media platform and see what everybody is up to. Every minute, somebody is uploading a new picture of that fancy vacation or a brand new handbag or the new apartment or the new house. And deep down, you may feel that tinge of insecurity and the need to keep up with everybody who's online. Worst of all, it could have you reaching for your credit card. But before you click checkout, consider this. Just like Knight Kiplinger said to us, you don't know how people are paying for the things that you see online. Chances are they're paying with credit cards and loans and getting themselves into a world of debt. I'm here with Nicole Christians, a certified financial planner and wealth management advisor at Merrill Lynch. Nicole, we're so happy to have you with us. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so part of the ever-changing landscape of the financial world that we live in today is the presence of social media. Everybody's on it. It sparks the need to buy more than we can afford. What can millennials do to combat that?
First and foremost, none of us are going to keep up with the Kardashians, so there's no point in trying. I think that, we're in this ever kind of changing race to produce that perfect Instagram image, and the absolute worst thing you can do is buy something on a credit card that you can't afford so that your friends can look at it on social media. It is going to introduce a world of problems for you. Racking up consumer debt, it's just not a good idea.
All right, so you're talking about mind controls here. You have to really have control. And we know that 6 out of 10 millennials admit that they buy something and have bought something because they've seen somebody, a friend, have it on social media and they wanted to be like them. And a quarter of them say they really couldn't afford it. They did it anyway, and then they really did live to regret it and at least admit it to the survey takers.
So 2 stats that just boggle my mind. 70% of millennials, so people aged over 25 right now, are relying on their parents just to support lifestyle. So the amount of spending that's going on that's discretionary and not really, the mailbox items is huge. And then 1 in 4 millennials have taken a premature withdrawal from their 401k plan just to pay a credit card.
Wow, let's just talk about that for a moment. From their 401k plan. The good news is that they're contributing to their 401k plan, and that money is growing tax deferred in a lot of cases, so it'll grow faster. But when you take money out, there's a penalty that you're going to have to pay for that, and you could lose 30% of that money.
Absolutely, yep, and then you lose the future growth on that money. So if you take it out at a young age, not only are you paying penalties and taxes, but then you're also losing those investable dollars in your retirement plan.
All right, everything we're talking about here really goes back to budget. What's the biggest budgeting tip that you have for millennials who are trying to set aside money to keep themselves going every day, but also for the future?
I think sometimes it's hard to come up with a true budget, but what it is much easier to do is pay yourself like a bill. So my best advice to young people is, rather than try to figure out where all of your dollars are going, figure out what you can pay to yourself first in order to establish that retirement savings early.
So I have a feeling that millennials could be scared to put together a budget because they think, well, if I stick to a budget, I can't have any fun in life, and I want to have fun right now in life, and retirement is like out there. That's not true. You can actually save, you can budget, and you can still have fun in your life.
Right, and millennials are great with technology, so there are all sorts of apps where you can track your spending, you can figure out where your money's going, but also you can budget in fun. So it doesn't mean that you can't have fun, it just means that, try to figure out where you can maybe pull from something else in order to pay for that and not put it on a credit card in order to have it happen.
All right, let's get back to retirement. I want to ask you a few questions about this. I think the hardest thing for so many people to understand is know knowing where to start and when to start. When do you start saving for retirement?
As early as you can. So time is your friend. If a 25-year-old saves exactly the same amount as a 35-year-old and they have the exact same rate of return, at age 65, the person that started saving earlier has 2 times the savings that the 35-year-old did.
Wow. And what about investing? Young people should start investing, we are told, but where do you start? How do you begin?
I would say be as aggressive as possible because your runway, especially on retirement savings, is extremely long. And over the long haul, the equity markets are going to produce much more than just throwing it into a savings account or under the mattress.
And so many millennials have said that they're afraid to invest in the stock market because they saw what happened to their parents during the dark days when we had the recession, and some accounts dropped by 30 to 40 to 50% or more, depending on what they were invested in. And they're afraid, so they're holding back. Your advice to them? Talk to them.
My advice to them is, if you look at the history of the stock market, if you look at the health of the stock market and the economy right now, in my view, there's no better time to be investing in the equity markets.
I asked one person one time who was in your field, when's the best time to invest? And he said, right now. Depending on what happens tomorrow, right now is the best time, because over time, we always seem to hit records and new highs. So 36% of the workforce right now is made up of freelancers. Now, these are people, many of them are millennials. They're participants in what we call the gig economy. They don't have traditional pension plans. They may not even have a 401k plan. What about their retirement goals?
So depending on their circumstances, they could establish a SEP, which is like an individual IRA, but if you're self-employed. You could do a Roth IRA depending on your tax bracket and your income, or you could contribute to an individual IRA, so more of a traditional IRA. So there are vehicles where you can get tax deferral, you can contribute to retirement savings, and it doesn't have to be through a traditional employer-sponsored plan.
Millennials are sure to live longer than generations before because we always see the next generation is living longer. And because of that, retirement is now being transformed from what used to be several years or maybe a decade to many decades, maybe 3 or 4 decades. So we're talking about maybe saving up to be able to support yourself for 30 or 40 years after your traditional work life is over.
Well, I guess that just goes back to the earlier the better. I mean, if you have to support a retirement that could last for literally decades, then you need to start saving now, and you need to really be thoughtful about, everyone's in a quick hurry to pay down debt, but you can't do that at the sacrifice of retirement savings, because the earlier you do it, the less you have to save effectively over your lifetime.
You make it sound so simple. Nicole, thank you for joining us today, but stay right where you are, because what we're going to do is we're going to come back with all of our guests from the show to get some final thoughts on millennials and their finances. Stay tuned. Here's an easy money tip. Avoiding temptations on social media can be challenging, but it's in your best interest to minimize your activity online so you can maximize your savings. Control your consumption on social media by muting accounts that leave you feeling insecure, and follow hashtags that empower you. Things like hashtag financial freedom can transform your feed into something that inspires you rather than something that makes you feel less than. You can also adjust the settings on your phone to limit your time on certain apps so that you're not wasting the day away seeing what other people are up to. Make it a point to ignore the ads that pop up while you're browsing. They're targeted to reel you in. But just ask yourself every time you see one, is it something I really need or something I want? If it's a want, remind yourself of your bigger goals that will feel much more satisfying than a material item. And remember, you don't know how your friends on social media are paying for their luxuries. They could be dealing with debt that carries into old age, while you'll be saving for a safe and secure future. I'm back with Deonte, David, and Nicole to ask one last question. So here it is. What is your biggest tip, biggest bit of financial advice that you can give the millennials that are watching us today?
The earlier the better, meaning create a budget now, stick to that budget, and commit to savings, because if you start earlier, it has huge impact down the road.
David.
As it relates to email, isolate and anonymize. Don't use the same email address for all the services that you're using online, and don't use your specific name. Create something that doesn't identify you as an individual, and then use a specific email for a specific service. You know it's going to be compromised. This will help protect you.
All right, Deonte.
My biggest piece of advice is just to start, If you don't take a step forward, you're going to be in the same spot. So when it comes down to saving, paying down debt, sit down with a financial professional, draw out a roadmap and a blueprint to get you to where you want to go. But again, don't be ashamed. Just have to start.
And for people who are afraid to pick up the phone and call and make an appointment with a financial professional, what can you tell them? It doesn't hurt, number one, and number two, you don't have to make any commitments.
No, and we're here to help. Sometimes young people come in and because they don't already have savings, they're too afraid to ask for help, and that's the opposite. We're here to help. So absolutely don't be afraid to pick up the phone.
And you can go and make an appointment, and it will cost you nothing, correct?
Right.
Correct.
What do you say when young people come in and they don't even know where to start, Deonte?
Yeah, I always like to tell them, listen, we're just going to start on a high level. We're going to get to know some of your goals, dreams, aspirations. What do you want to accomplish? And we're going to take it from there. We're just here to be a resource, like you said.
There you have it. Deonte, David, Nicole, three experts that prove that millennial finances really don't have to be complicated after all. You just have to listen and learn. With the right advice and the right guidance, financial success is within reach, and it can accompany millennials through their entire lives. The valuable information we've given you today can be used to overcome challenges and to take control of your money once and for all. There's a lot more that you can learn about personal finance, and we have more to share about spending and saving and investing, and more topics to help you make the most of your money. Hope you'll visit our website, wi65.org. We're also sociable. Follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, at WI65 Project. Tell us what you think, or give us a piece of your mind. Most importantly, ask us your questions. We'll look for the answers. Until next time, I'm Murray Feldman. Thank you for watching Easy Money.